This is Ed Colman, Head of Communications and Engagement and Public Affairs for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority.
The importance of buses in mayoral combined authorities, where you've got that split between rural and urban populations, is something that's come through loud and clear through the process. We implemented an approach based around the 5 cases in the business model. So the strategic case, the economic case, the commercial case, the financial case, and the management case, in terms of what it was we were proposing. So for us, we were really focused on trying to make sure that people had enough information to give us an informed response, and they understood the sort of range of issues around franchising. So not just making this a sort of binary referendum on the proposed franchising scheme, but also one of the challenges is that we know everyone has something to say around buses, but actually channeling that in a way that was constructive and able to add value not only to this consultation but to others. But there was an absolute focus on making sure the consultation was as representative as possible, and thinking about those groups, those hard to reach audiences, those demographics facing one or multiple barriers in terms of traditional engagement, and making sure that they were at the forefront of our thinking as we went through. So we had a really good insight base in terms of what we knew people already thought around buses in the region, and some of the challenges that people were seeing in terms of the reliability, the punctuality, the affordability, and just the connectivity of services, the sort of integration of services arriving that didn't allow for people to catch connecting trains or connecting services as well. So we wanted to try and utilise that work we'd already done in the consultation as well, which was almost the sort of case for change that's prevalent through the business case, that ultimately the do nothing option, the managed decline option, was not an option, because it would have meant less services and further decline and further risk of isolation and reduced connectivity. Other key point, I think, absolutely making sure that we'd taken those top 4 census languages in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and made sure that the material was available for those outside of English, and then making that point that this wasn't just a consultation for those current bus users. Bus users are an incredibly important part of the demographic, but also those who could benefit from the bus in future, thinking about our wider responsibilities and how we might look to encourage behaviour change and the knock-on impact in terms of congestion, which we know is particularly an issue in Cambridge. That long and short questionnaire structure enabled us to pull something together which could be evaluated against the 5-case model and provided specific feedback against the 5 cases, so we could demonstrate at the end of it this was feedback received both from statutory consultees and non-statutory consultees against the 5 cases, as well as that sort of overall opinion around the implementation of a franchising scheme versus the implementation of an enhanced partnership. Under the strategic case, so one of those 5 cases, we ended up with 12 different themes from the code frame, which allowed us to really look at that. You said, we've listened, we've actioned, we've reflected feedback and made sure that the business case and the proposed franchising scheme is fit for purpose for the residents and businesses of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And that flexibility throughout the consultation process to dynamically evolve the code frame, where we started to get some more diverse responses that maybe didn't follow the initial themes that we saw coming through. And we set ourselves an initial target of about 1,200 responses, so we're pleased with the 1,600 that we had back for us as an authority, as a smaller combined authority. This was sort of our first significant piece of public consultation in this way, certainly since I joined the organisation a couple of years ago, and has sort of established a new benchmark for us in terms of our approach to public consultation and statutory consultations. Overall, in terms of the support and the pros for the franchising scheme, this was the headline that then led to that decision being taken earlier this year around the proposed franchising scheme. What's not covered in the slides that I think is probably really important to mention at this stage is the idea around ongoing engagement through the mobilisation. So the period from a decision to implement a franchising scheme to first services operating under a franchise model for us is going to be somewhere in the region of about 2.5 years. And during that time, what's really clear is that that insight, those resident groups, that engagement, the we've built up during the consultation. They want to work with us to shape what a franchise network looks like and what the franchise scheme looks like in reality across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And ultimately, that's only a good thing. For us, it's been a really beneficial exercise, both in terms of establishing a new benchmark for statutory consultation following a sort of period of change and transformation within the team, but also about showing the opportunities going forward, and giving us an opportunity to put engagement and ongoing engagement at the heart of that mobilisation plan.
I'm sure many of you already know John Paul Danon, who is CAN's collaboration director.
I think when you embark on amplifying a consultation, you've got some challenges, and these challenges aren't getting smaller. So media consumption is less and less centralized. There's more fragmentation, particularly by specific audiences. There's a huge challenge around the complexity of some of the things we're trying to talk about and simplifying them. There's also a huge challenge around the sorts of user experiences that we give people in order to interact, which is linked to the complexity, but also to the number of questions and things that we need to ask. And there's always a problem with getting representation from audiences that, through either scarce resources or lack of trust, are less inclined to interact with us. And what we've learned over time is, obviously a multi-channel approach is essential, but which channels work best? The use of video explainers, making user experience and landing pages really, really inclusive, and maybe as well having various levels of priority of questions so that you can achieve much more scale. Focusing on Ed's campaign, it was really useful throughout the campaign to be able to correlate not just campaign interactions and measured interactions, but also the impact of those interactions on response rates. So to measure submissions by date and then to look at various activities and understand what drove responses. The campaign was designed so that it was segmented and had tracking so we could see what was driving interaction. We got very poor response from some of the more unmeasurable above the line activities like radio and digital 6-sheets and supermarkets and so on. So much so that we could then look at the cost per land. It was about £81 for above the line activities, so out of home, things like that, and about 29 pence for paid digital. The top performing tactic throughout was remarketing to the buses information pages in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and to certain pages on the council estate, like school term dates and things like that. So we're able to build audience in places where we knew people were who might have an opinion and bring that audience through. And the school term dates page was brilliant for getting responses from parents because that was an underrepresented group. I think also in the field of user experience, it's well worth considering, particularly on social media, using in-platform forms. Social media doesn't like you clicking to and clicking away from their platforms. They want you to stay there. So consider building elements of the consultation or even the whole thing in Snapchat, in Meta, and potentially in LinkedIn and places like that. That can lead to like 5 times the response. You've got your owned channels, direct mail, and awareness channels, social and Google, but then you've also got search and remarketing, really important for driving people that bounce back to surveys and getting them to complete, and then really accessible, simple user experience at the other end. That data then all needs to be fed together so that you can optimize. You can really see where the gaps are, where you need to refocus efforts and so on. And with that setup, you can deliver, or it becomes much less painful to deliver consultation amplification. And so over the period of the campaign, we can optimize and drive towards the channels and activities that are working. So at the beginning of the campaign, you're at your least efficient, and at the end, you're most efficient.